My name is Eva. I'm 35 years old, and I've been a single mother for the past 8 years. Right now, I'm standing in my small kitchen in Austin, preparing dinner for my daughter Lily, when my phone rings with a number I haven't seen in years. It's my sister Sophia, and hearing her voice after 8 years of silence brings back memories I've worked so hard to bury. 8 years ago, my world crumbled in a single afternoon when I discovered the two people I trusted most had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I was 7 months pregnant, planning my wedding, and believed I had the perfect life. Then everything shattered. But here's what they didn't expect. I didn't just survive, I thrived. And now, after all these years, they're both calling me, begging for something I'm not sure they deserve. Before I share what happened that changed everything, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, this journey will show you just how strong a mother's love can be when she's pushed to her limits. Now let me take you back to where it all began. 8 years ago, I was 27 years old, working at a marketing company in Denver, Colorado. My life felt like a fairy tale. I had been dating James for 4 years, and we'd been living together for 2. James was 29, a construction engineer with a steady income and the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. We were planning our wedding for the following spring, and I spent my evenings browsing through bridal magazines and dreaming about our future together. James and I had met at a coffee shop near downtown Denver. I was rushing to work, spilled my latte all over his blueprints, and instead of getting angry, he laughed and asked if he could buy me another coffee to make up for the mess I'd made. That laugh, warm and genuine, made my heart skip a beat. 4 years later, we were talking about forever. Our relationship was everything I'd ever wanted. James would surprise me with little notes in my lunch bag, and we'd spend weekends hiking through the Rocky Mountains or exploring small towns around Colorado. Last Christmas, we'd taken a trip to Colorado Springs, and I caught him looking at engagement rings when he thought I wasn't paying attention. My heart had nearly burst with happiness that day. But the person I was closest to in the world besides James was my younger sister, Sophia. She was 24, fresh out of college with a degree in graphic design, and still searching for her first real job. Sophia had always been the baby of our family, and I'd taken on the role of her protector since we were kids. When our parents divorced when I was 16 and she was 13, I made sure she felt loved and supported through everything. Sophia practically lived at our apartment. She'd come over 3 or 4 times a week, and James and I loved having her around. She'd curl up on our couch for movie nights, help me cook elaborate dinners, and James would joke that he was getting 2 sisters for the price of 1 when he married me. Sophia would laugh and say she was practicing to be the best aunt in the world. Then came the most beautiful surprise of my life. I discovered I was pregnant during my 6th week. I'd been feeling tired and a little nauseous, but I attributed it to work stress. When that second pink line appeared on the pregnancy test, I sat on my bathroom floor and cried tears of pure joy. I planned the perfect way to tell James. I made reservations at Romano's, our favorite Italian restaurant, where we'd had our first official date. During dessert, I slid a small wrapped box across the table. Inside was a pair of tiny baby booties with a note that read, "Daddy's little helper arriving in 8 months." James stared at the booties for what felt like forever, then looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Are you serious?" he whispered, and when I nodded, he jumped up from his chair and pulled me into his arms, right there in the middle of the restaurant. "We're having a baby, Wall," he said loud enough for nearby tables to hear, and I didn't care who was watching. I had never been happier. The next morning, I called Sophia to share the news. She screamed with excitement so loud that James heard her from the kitchen. "I'm going to be an aunt," she kept saying. "Eva, this is the best news ever. I'm going to spoil this baby so much." She immediately started making plans to help me decorate the nursery and insisted on taking me shopping for maternity clothes. Those first few months of pregnancy were magical. James was incredibly attentive, bringing me ginger tea when I felt sick in the mornings and rubbing my feet every evening. We spent our weekends at baby stores picking out cribs and tiny clothes. Sophia was just as excited as we were, constantly sending me articles about pregnancy and bringing over books about child development. I remember one Saturday afternoon when all 3 of us were in the baby's room, painting the walls a soft yellow since we wanted to be surprised about the gender. Sophia was carefully painting around the window trim while James assembled the crib. I was organizing tiny onesies by size, and everything felt perfect. I looked around that room and thought, this is what happiness looks like. I had the love of my life, my best friend and sister by my side, and a baby on the way. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. By my 4th month of pregnancy, subtle changes began creeping into my perfect life, though I didn't recognize them as warning signs at first. James started acting differently in ways that were small but noticeable. He'd always been affectionate and talkative, sharing details about his workday and asking about mine. But gradually he became more distant during our conversations, often checking his phone while I was talking to him. His work schedule seemed to become more demanding too. James began staying late at the office more frequently, sometimes not coming home until 9 or 10 at night. When I'd ask about his projects, he'd give vague answers about deadlines and difficult clients. "Just work stress, babe," he'd say, kissing my forehead. "Things will calm down soon." But they never seemed to. What bothered me most was how his enthusiasm about our wedding plans had faded. Earlier in my pregnancy, we'd spent hours looking at venues and discussing guest lists. Now, whenever I brought up booking the church or choosing a caterer, James would say, "We have time to figure that out," or "Let's focus on the baby first." I started to worry that he was having second thoughts about marriage, but when I tried to talk to him about it, he assured me everything was fine. Sophia's behavior was changing too, in ways that left me feeling confused and hurt. My sister, who used to visit us constantly, suddenly seemed too busy for our regular get-togethers. When she did come over, she seemed nervous and distracted, avoiding eye contact with me and leaving earlier than usual. I'd catch her staring at James when she thought no one was looking, but when I'd ask if everything was okay, she'd quickly look away and change the subject. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and found James and Sophia talking quietly by the window. They were standing closer together than seemed necessary, and their conversation stopped abruptly when they saw me. "What were you two discussing?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Oh, just asking James about job opportunities in construction companies," Sophia replied quickly. "I'm thinking about expanding my job search." But something about their body language felt off, though I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. The most hurtful change was when Sophia declined to help organize my baby shower. For weeks we'd been planning the celebration together, choosing decorations and making guest lists. Then suddenly she called to say she couldn't help anymore because she'd found a part-time job that required weekend work. "I'm really sorry, Eva," she said, and I could hear genuine regret in her voice. "I know how important this is to you." I told her I understood, but inside I felt abandoned by the person I'd counted on most. I tried to rationalize everything away. James was probably just nervous about becoming a father and the financial responsibility that came with it. Sophia was under pressure to find stable employment and start her adult life. My pregnancy hormones were likely making me more sensitive to normal changes in behavior. I kept telling myself that I was reading too much into innocent situations, but there was one night that I couldn't explain away so easily. I woke up around 2 in the morning to use the bathroom and noticed James wasn't in bed. I found him in the living room typing on his phone with an expression I'd never seen before. His face was soft and almost tender as he read whatever message he'd received. When he noticed me watching, he quickly closed the phone and slipped it into his pocket. "Who are you texting so late?" I asked, settling beside him on the couch. "Just work stuff," he said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. At 2 in the morning, I pressed gently. "Some of the guys work night shifts," he explained. "We were discussing tomorrow's schedule." It wasn't exactly suspicious, but something about his tone felt rehearsed, like he'd prepared this explanation in advance. The following weekend, James said he had to work on Saturday, which was unusual since construction sites typically closed on weekends, except for emergency repairs. I decided to surprise him with lunch, so I drove toward the commercial district where his current project was located. But as I turned onto Sophia's street to take a shortcut, I saw James's distinctive blue pickup truck parked 2 blocks from her apartment building. My heart started racing as I pulled over and stared at his truck, trying to come up with an innocent explanation for why he'd be in this neighborhood when he was supposed to be at work. Everything came crashing down on a Friday afternoon during my 28th week of pregnancy. I'd been feeling unusually tired that day, so I decided to leave work early and surprise James with a home-cooked dinner. The autumn air was crisp and beautiful, and I stopped at the grocery store to buy ingredients for his favorite meal, chicken parmesan with garlic bread. I even picked up a bouquet of sunflowers from the florist, thinking we could have a romantic evening at home. As I approached our apartment building, I felt excited about this spontaneous gesture. James had been working so hard lately, and I wanted to show him how much I appreciated everything he was doing to prepare for our baby's arrival. I climbed the stairs to our second-floor apartment, juggling the grocery bags and flowers, already imagining the surprise on his face when he saw me home early. But when I unlocked our front door and stepped inside, I heard voices coming from the living room. James was definitely home, and someone was with him. At first, I assumed it might be one of his coworkers discussing a project, so I started to call out a greeting. Then I recognized the second voice, and my blood turned to ice. It was Sophia. I stood frozen in our entryway, the grocery bags heavy in my arms, as their conversation became clearer. They weren't discussing work or casual topics. Their voices were low and intimate with an urgency that made my stomach clench with dread. "We can't keep hiding this forever, James," I heard Sophia say, and there was a tremor in her voice that I'd never heard before. "I know," James replied, and his tone was gentle, in a way that he usually reserved for me. "But Eva is almost 7 months pregnant. How can I tell her now?" The grocery bags slipped from my hands and hit the floor, but somehow I managed to catch them before they made too much noise. My heart was pounding so hard that I was sure they'd be able to hear it. I pressed myself against the wall, knowing I should announce my presence but unable to move or speak. "What about our baby?" Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper, but her words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm 12 weeks along, James. I can't hide it much longer. 12 weeks pregnant." My sister was 12 weeks pregnant, and James was talking about it like it was his child. I felt dizzy and had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. The baby in my belly seemed to sense my distress and began moving restlessly, little feet pressing against my ribs as if trying to comfort me. How is this possible? How long had this been going on? How could the two people I loved and trusted most in the world do this to me? "I've loved you since the day Eva introduced us," Sophia continued, and now she was crying. I tried to ignore these feelings, I really did. But when we finally gave in to them 4 months ago, I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. 4 months ago, that was exactly when I'd noticed the changes in both of them, when James became distant and Sophia started avoiding our family dinners. "I love you too," James said, and hearing him say those words to my sister made me feel like I was dying inside. I've been fighting these feelings for so long, trying to do the right thing, but being with you feels like coming home, Sophia. I don't know how to choose between you and Eva, especially now with both of you carrying my children. Both of them carrying his children. The words echoed in my head as I realized the full scope of their betrayal. This wasn't just an affair, it was a complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my life. James hadn't just cheated on me with some random woman. He'd fallen in love with my sister, gotten her pregnant, and been living this double life while I planned our wedding and prepared for our baby. I knew I should walk away, should give myself time to process this information before confronting them. But I couldn't move. I needed to see them together with my own eyes to confirm that this nightmare was really happening. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward the living room, still carrying the flowers I'd bought to surprise the man who had just shattered my world. The scene in our living room was even worse than I'd imagined. James and Sophia were sitting on the couch, where we'd watched movies just weeks ago, her hand resting on his arm, while his thumb traced gentle circles on her wrist. Sophia's other hand was protectively placed over her stomach, and even though she was still in the early stages of pregnancy, I could see a small bump beneath her loose sweater that she'd obviously been trying to hide. When they saw me standing in the doorway with the sunflowers in my hand, both of them jumped apart like teenagers caught by their parents. The color drained from James's face, and Sophia let out a small gasp that sounded almost like a sob. For what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, none of us moved or spoke. The silence was deafening. The bouquet of sunflowers fell from my trembling hands and scattered across the hardwood floor, their bright yellow petals a stark contrast to the darkness that had just descended on my life. "How long?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely recognizable even to myself. James opened his mouth several times before any words came out. "Eva, I can explain," he started, but I held up my hand to stop him. "How long has this been going on?" I repeated, looking back and forth between him and my sister. Sophia was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for this to happen. I tried to stay away, I really did. But sorry wasn't an answer, and it certainly wasn't going to fix the devastation they'd caused." 4 months, James said quietly, finally finding the courage to look me in the eye. "It started 4 months ago, Eva. You have to understand, neither of us planned this. It just happened. 4 months. While I was dealing with morning sickness and planning our future, he was falling in love with my sister. While I was excitedly showing him ultrasound pictures, he was creating another baby with the person I trusted most in the world. Just happened, I repeated, and I could hear my voice getting stronger, fueled by an anger I'd never felt before. You just happened to fall into bed with my sister. You just happened to get her pregnant while I'm carrying your child. None of this just happens, James. These are choices you both made. Sophia stood up abruptly, her hands still covering her belly. Ava, please let me explain. I've been in love with James since the day you brought him home to meet our family. I know that's terrible, and I know it makes me an awful sister, but I couldn't help how I felt. So you decided to act on those feelings while I was planning our wedding? I asked, turning to face her fully. You sat in this very room helping me choose wedding colors and talking about how excited you were to be my maid of honor, all while you were sleeping with my fiance. James tried to interject. Eva, Sophia isn't the only one to blame here. I made the choice to pursue this relationship. I should have been honest with you from the beginning about my feelings. Your feelings, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. What about your responsibilities? What about the promises you made to me? What about the baby we're supposed to be raising together? I placed both hands on my swollen belly, feeling our daughter move inside me, as if she could sense the chaos surrounding her. I want to take care of both babies, James said desperately. I know this situation is complicated, but I love both of you. We can figure this out together. Maybe we can all raise the children as a family. The audacity of his suggestion left me speechless for a moment. He actually thought I would agree to some twisted arrangement where I shared my life and my child's father with my own sister. Are you completely insane? I asked. Do you honestly think I would agree to that? Sophia stepped forward, reaching for my hand, but I pulled away before she could touch me. Eva, I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but we're still family. These babies are going to be siblings, and they deserve to know each other. Maybe we can find a way to make this work for everyone. Family. I stared at her in disbelief. Family doesn't betray each other like this. Family doesn't lie and sneak around and destroy each other's lives. You stopped being my family the moment you decided to sleep with my fiance. The pain in my chest was overwhelming, like someone had reached inside and torn my heart in half. These weren't strangers who had betrayed me. This was the man I'd planned to spend my life with, and the sister I'd protected and loved since childhood. The two people who were supposed to love me most had chosen each other over me. I need you both to leave, I said, my voice steady, despite the storm raging inside me. Right now, get out of my apartment and don't come back. Eva, please, James pleaded. Let's talk about this rationally. We can work through this together. But I was done talking, done listening to their explanations and justifications. I walked to the front door and held it open, waiting for them to leave. After they gathered their things and walked out, I locked the door behind them and slumped against it, finally allowing myself to fall apart completely. I slid down to the floor and sobbed until my chest ached and my eyes were swollen shut. My baby girl moved restlessly inside me, and I placed my hands on my belly, whispering promises that everything would be okay, even though I had no idea how that could possibly be true. I thought surely my family would rally around me when they learned what James and Sophia had done. I was wrong. The next morning, I called my mother, expecting comfort and support during the worst crisis of my life. Instead, I received another devastating blow. Mom, I said through my tears, I need to tell you what happened yesterday. I explained everything from finding them together to learning about Sophia's pregnancy. I waited for her outrage for her to express shock and disappointment at Sophia's betrayal. Instead, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Oh, honey, she finally said, and her tone was sympathetic but not nearly as angry as I'd expected. This is certainly a complicated situation. I'm sure you're very hurt right now, but you need to think about what's best for your baby. What's best for my baby, I repeated. Mom, James cheated on me with Sophia. They've both betrayed me in the worst possible way. How is staying with him what's best for anyone? Eva. I understand you're emotional right now, and pregnancy hormones are probably making everything feel more intense, she said, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But James is still the father of your child. Sophia is young and made a mistake, but she's still your sister. Maybe you should consider counseling to work through this as a family. A mistake? I was standing in my kitchen, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles were white. Mom, this wasn't a mistake. This was a 4-month affair that resulted in a pregnancy. They made calculated decisions to lie to me and betray me every single day. Sophia called me this morning, my mother admitted. She's devastated about hurting you, but she's also scared and pregnant and needs her family's support. James also reached out to your father asking if he could help mediate a conversation between all of you. I felt like I was in an alternate reality where I was the unreasonable one for being upset about my sister and fiance's affair. So you've talked to both of them, but this is the first conversation you're having with me about it. Eva, sweetheart, I'm trying to think about everyone involved here. You have 2 babies on the way who are going to be siblings. These children didn't ask for this situation, but they deserve to have their families in their lives. Maybe if you could find it in your heart to forgive. I hung up the phone before she could finish that sentence. Forgive them, I was supposed to forgive the people who had destroyed my life, and then somehow make it work for the sake of family harmony. I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. My father called an hour later, and while he was more reserved than my mother, his message was essentially the same. Eva, I know this is painful, but families go through difficult times. James seems genuinely remorseful, and Sophia is beside herself with guilt. Maybe some time and space will help everyone gain perspective. Even my older brother David, who I'd always counted on to be protective of me, seemed more concerned about family unity than justice for what had been done to me. Look, sis, what they did was wrong, but you're all going to be connected for life because of these kids. Holding on to anger isn't going to help anyone. As my pregnancy progressed through those final weeks, I found myself completely isolated from the people who were supposed to love and support me. James called constantly, leaving voicemails where he alternated between apologizing and explaining how he wanted to be there for our daughter's birth. Sophia sent long text messages describing her guilt and begging for forgiveness, always ending with pleas for us to find a way to be a family again. The loneliness was crushing. I had no one to talk to about my fears for labor and delivery, no one to help me install the car seat or pack my hospital bag. I attended my final prenatal appointments alone, listening to other expectant mothers chat with their partners about nursery preparations and birth plans while I sat in silence. When labor started at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, I drove myself to the hospital and checked in alone. The nurses kept asking about my birth partner, and I kept explaining that it would just be me. Their pitying looks made everything worse, but I was determined to prove that I could handle this on my own. Lily's birth was both the most beautiful and most heartbreaking experience of my life. When the doctor placed her on my chest, she was perfect tiny fingers and toes, a head full of dark hair and eyes that seemed to look directly at me with trust and love. "It's just you and me now, baby girl," I whispered to her, tears streaming down my face. I named her Lily after my favorite flower, wanting her to have something beautiful that was entirely ours. As I held her for the first time, I made a silent promise that I would be everything she needed, that she would never feel the pain of abandonment or betrayal that was currently destroying me. 2 hours after Lily was born, a nurse came in to tell me that there was a man in the hallway claiming to be the baby's father. James had somehow found out I was in labor, probably through my mother, and had come to the hospital. I refused to let him in the room, but I could see him through the window in the door, staring at his daughter with tears in his eyes. That image of him looking at Lily through the glass made my decision crystal clear. I couldn't stay in Denver anymore. I couldn't raise my daughter in a place where she would constantly be exposed to the chaos and drama of this situation. Sophia and James would always be around my family, would always be pushing for reconciliation, and Lily would grow up in the middle of that storm. While I was still in the hospital, I called my supervisor at work and asked about the transfer opportunity to our Austin office that had been offered to me months earlier. "I know the timing isn't ideal with the baby just born," I said, "but I really need a fresh start." She was understanding and supportive, agreeing to hold the position for me until I was ready to relocate. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful about the future. Austin would give Lily and me a chance to build a life that wasn't defined by other people's choices and mistakes. We could be ourselves there, without the constant pressure to forgive and forget for the sake of family peace. When Lily was 8 weeks old, we moved to Austin, Texas, with nothing but 2 suitcases, a diaper bag, and the determination to start over. I'd found a small 1-bedroom apartment near downtown Austin, with big windows that let in beautiful natural light and hardwood floors that creaked when I walked across them holding my daughter. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and for the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt like I could breathe again. Starting over as a single mother in a new city was overwhelming in ways I hadn't anticipated. The marketing firm where I'd transferred was understanding about my situation, allowing me to work flexible hours while Lily was so young, but balancing full-time work with caring for an infant, all while trying to establish myself in a new place pushed me to my physical and emotional limits. Those first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and exhausting days. Lily was a good baby, but she still needed to be fed every few hours around the clock. I'd stumble out of bed at 2 in the morning, then 4, then 6, warming bottles and changing diapers, then somehow find the energy to shower, dress professionally, and be coherent for client meetings. Some mornings I'd catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognize the tired woman staring back at me. There were nights when I'd sit in the rocking chair I'd bought at a thrift store, holding Lily while she slept, and cry quietly so I wouldn't wake her. Not because I regretted my decision to leave Denver, but because the loneliness felt endless. I missed having someone to share the beautiful moments with, like when Lily smiled for the first time, or when she grabbed my finger with her tiny hand. I missed having a partner to take turns during the difficult nights when she was fussy, and nothing seemed to comfort her. But gradually, life in Austin began to improve. My first real friend was Maria, a coworker who was originally from Mexico, and also raising children as a single mother. Maria had 2 kids, ages 6 and 9, and she took me under her wing with a kindness I desperately needed. Single motherhood is not a weakness, Maria told me one day when I was feeling particularly overwhelmed. It's a superpower that you don't know you have until you're forced to use it. She invited me to join a support group for single mothers that met every other Wednesday evening, and slowly I began to build a community of women who understood exactly what I was going through. Sarah, my neighbor across the hall, became another lifeline. She was a retired teacher in her 60s who adored Lily and often offered to babysit when I had to work late or attend evening meetings. I raised 4 children of my own, she'd say, reaching for Lily with experienced hands. One more little angel is pure joy for me. As Lily grew from a newborn into an active, curious baby, I watched her personality emerge. She was fearless and determined, pulling herself up to standing long before other babies her age, and babbling constantly as if she had important things to say but hadn't quite figured out the words yet. When she took her first steps at 11 months, she walked directly toward me with the biggest smile I'd ever seen, and I knew that everything I'd sacrificed to give her this life had been worth it. My career began to flourish in ways I hadn't expected. The Austin office appreciated my work ethic and creativity, and after 2 years, I was promoted to senior account manager. With the raise came the opportunity to move to a 2-bedroom apartment with a small patio where Lily could play outside. I bought her a little slide and sandbox, and we'd spend weekend mornings in our tiny yard, her laughter filling the space with pure happiness. I started taking evening classes in digital marketing to advance my skills, and Maria would watch Lily during those few hours each week. The intellectual challenge felt good, reminding me that I was more than just a mother, that I had professional goals and dreams that mattered. When I completed the certificate program, I felt proud of myself in a way I hadn't experienced since before the betrayal. Lily and I developed our own traditions that had nothing to do with the life I'd left behind in Denver. Friday nights became our pizza night, where we'd order from the little Italian place down the street and watch animated movies together. Saturdays were for exploring Austin's parks and playgrounds, and Sundays we'd visit the farmers market downtown, where Lily would charm all the vendors with her bright smile and endless energy. By the time Lily turned 3, I realized that I was genuinely happy. Not the desperate forced happiness I'd tried to feel in the months after leaving Denver, but real contentment with the life we'd built together. I'd learned to change my own oil, fix basic plumbing problems, and navigate parent-teacher conferences without feeling like I was missing some crucial piece of the puzzle. More importantly, I'd learned to value my own strength. I was raising a confident, loving, intelligent little girl entirely on my own, and doing it well. Lily was secure and joyful, surrounded by a chosen family of friends and neighbors who adored her. She didn't ask about having a daddy, because the life we'd created together felt complete to her. When Lily started kindergarten, I was promoted again, this time to creative director for the agency. The position came with a significant salary increase that allowed us to move into a small house with an actual yard where Lily could run and play. I planted a vegetable garden that first summer, teaching her about patience and nurturing as we watched tomatoes and carrots grow from seeds. By Lily's 6th birthday, our life in Austin felt solid and established. I had close friendships, a career I loved, and a daughter who was thriving in school and activities. We'd created something beautiful from the ashes of my former life, and I was proud of both of us for how far we'd come. Then on a quiet Thursday evening, when Lily was 8 years old, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in almost 8 years. It was Sophia, and hearing her voice after so long brought back a flood of memories I'd worked hard to process and move beyond. "Eva," she said, and I could hear that she was crying. "I know I have no right to call you, but I didn't know who else to turn to." Her voice was different, older, and tired in a way that surprised me. I sat down on my couch watching Lily color at the kitchen table and tried to prepare myself for whatever Sophia was about to tell me. "What's wrong?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "My marriage to James is over," she said between sobs. "He left us 3 months ago. He's been having an affair with a woman from his office, and when I confronted him about it, he said he wanted a divorce. Eva, I finally understand what we put you through, and I'm so sorry." The irony wasn't lost on me. James had done exactly what I'd known he was capable of doing, choosing to betray the person who loved him most when someone new caught his attention. But hearing the pain in Sophia's voice, I felt sadness rather than satisfaction. "I have a son," Sophia continued. "Tommy is 7 years old, and he keeps asking why Daddy doesn't live with us anymore. I don't know how to explain that his father abandoned us for someone else. I don't know how to be a single mother. I don't know how you did it." Sophia went on to describe the past few years of her marriage to James. The initial happiness had faded quickly once the excitement of their forbidden romance became the reality of daily life with a baby. James had grown restless and distant, much like he had with me during my pregnancy. He'd started working late again, making excuses to avoid family time, and eventually Sophia had discovered text messages that revealed his new affair. "He told me I was being paranoid and controlling when I asked about his behavior," Sophia said. "The same things he probably said to you when you started noticing changes. I can't believe I was so naive to think it would be different with me." "What do you want from me, Sophia?" I asked gently, because despite everything that had happened between us, I could hear that she was genuinely suffering. "I want to apologize," she said. "Not because I need your forgiveness to move on with my life, but because you deserved better from both of us, and I've never properly acknowledged that. I was young and selfish and so caught up in my own feelings that I never considered the damage we were doing to you." A week after Sophia's call, James contacted me directly. His voice was different, too humbled in a way I'd never heard before. "Eva, I know I have no right to ask anything of you after what I did, but I was hoping we could talk about Lily. She's my daughter, and I've missed 8 years of her life because of my own terrible choices." James explained that his divorce from Sophia was forcing him to confront the pain he'd caused and the relationships he'd destroyed in pursuit of his own desires. He said he'd been in therapy trying to understand why he'd made such destructive choices, and his counselor had encouraged him to reach out to me. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I don't even think I deserve it. But I was hoping maybe that Lily could know she has a father who thinks about her every day and regrets not being in her life." Listening to both of their calls, I felt a strange sense of peace, rather than the anger or vindication I might have expected. Their pain was real, but it didn't belong to me anymore. I'd built a life that wasn't defined by their choices or their regrets. "James," I said calmly, "Lily is a happy, well-adjusted child who doesn't know she's missing anything from her life. If you want to be part of her world, you'll have to prove that you're stable and committed for the long term, not just feeling guilty in this moment." I told him that any relationship with Lily would have to be built slowly and carefully, with her emotional well-being as the top priority. He would need to demonstrate consistency and reliability before I'd even consider introducing him to her as her father. "You don't get to disrupt her life because you've suddenly decided you want to be a dad," I said firmly. To Sophia, I offered something I never thought I'd be able to give: forgiveness. "I forgive you," I told her, and meant it. Not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to that anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. We both have children to raise now, and they deserve mothers who aren't carrying around old bitterness. But forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. I made it clear to both of them that while I wished them well in rebuilding their lives, they wouldn't be part of mine and Lily's daily world. Too much had happened, too much trust had been broken for us to ever be a family in the way they'd once envisioned. That night after Lily had gone to bed, I sat on our back porch looking at the stars and thinking about the journey that had brought us to this moment. 8 years ago, I thought my life was ending when I discovered their betrayal. Instead, it had been the beginning of something better than I could have imagined. I'd learned that betrayal doesn't define you, but how you rise from it does. I'd discovered a strength I never knew: I possessed the ability to create a loving, stable home for my daughter entirely on my own. Most importantly, I taught Lily through my example that we don't need anyone else to be complete, that we're enough just as we are. The forgiveness I'd offered wasn't about James and Sophia. It was about freeing myself from the last chains of a painful past so I could fully embrace the beautiful life Lily and I had built together. And sitting there under the Texas stars with my daughter, sleeping peacefully in her bed, and our future stretching out ahead of us full of possibility, I knew that everything had turned out exactly as it was meant to be. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to forgive someone who deeply hurt you? How do you teach your children about resilience and self-worth? Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming life's biggest challenges. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they know and that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most beautiful transformations. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you have more strength inside you than you realize. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people you love.